Hey guys, welcome to the AG Composites YouTube channel. If you're looking for a tutorial to properly mount a rifle scope, check it out. So if you speak with almost any optic manufacturer, they'll tell you that the vast majority of rifle scope problems come from improper mounting. So we're going to do it the right way today. You're going to start with kind of two tools here. A torque wrench, that's important, and a Wheeler Engineering scope leveling kit. Pull out the two components in the Wheeler Engineering kit. First thing we're going to do is place the small level on the Picatinny rail and then level the rifle. My favorite way of doing this is to take a bipod with adjustable cant and tighten the cant tension on the bipod and then use a pretty heavy rear bag and then just tilt the rifle until you have it perfectly level. Then you take the other part of the Wheeler kit and you install it on the barrel and get it relatively close to begin with to level. It does have fine and coarse adjustment. The coarse adjustment is actually the clamp, and the fine adjustment can be done after it's been clamped to the barrel. And what this piece does is it remains on the rifle when we remove the little level. And it's going to tell us throughout this entire process if we are keeping the rifle level. So we're gonna double check that the rifle has remained level, which it has. And then we're going to use the fine adjustment to get the barrel clamp level. All right, we're not going to touch that again. Throughout this whole process, that front clamp remains exactly where it is. We can now remove this. The next step in the process is to install your ring bases. And there's two schools of thought here. Number one, the rifle under recoil wants to jump back. So you would push your rings forward up against the front lug of the Picatinny rail. Another school of thought is, well, if we have one pushed forward and one pushed backward, it doesn't matter which way there's force induced to the rifle. Now the scope is completely locked in. Those lugs are up against the Picatinny. So I'm gonna do the second approach. I'm gonna hold this one rearward toward the back of the rifle and just snug it up. I'm not going to use the torque wrench right now. Just an Allen key is a little bit quicker initially. And this one, the front one, I'm going to push forward into the Picatinny lugs. That way when the rifle jumps back under recoil, it's metal on metal. Now here's the little hack if you do not have a Picatinny rail on your gun. So let's just say this is a Remington 700 receiver. It's round on top. You can't place this level. Once your rings are on, you can put the level on your rings to check if the rifle's level. So if I didn't have a Picatinny rail, I would do this step before placing my front barrel clamp on. So we're still level, good to go. So the next step of this process is we're going to tighten these rings up before we do anything else. Check the specs on your optic manufacturer. I'm going to take these Picatinny screws to 50 inch-pounds. And again, I'm just keeping a little rearward pressure on this one, even though I snugged it up. And a little bit of forward pressure on this one as I snug it up to 50 inch-pounds. Now that I've done that, I'm just going to double check that my rifle is level. Very close. Okay, cool. So now we're going to drop the scope into the rings. All right. If you'll see here, I put a little piece of tape on because I did a little bit of work on the front end. I already know how far back I want my scope, and I'll show you guys kind of how to do that in a minute. But I already know where I want it forward, backward for optimal eye relief. Some scopes have a bigger eye box, some have a smaller eye box. So that part of the process is more or less important based on your own eyes and based on the optic you're using. So what I just noticed there was that when I drop this in here, where I want it for my proper eye relief, I've found that I can move this ring forward one more notch. So I'm going to take the scope off. I'm going to leave this one where it is. I'm going to take this ring back off. Cool. So again, with my witness mark here, my indicator from my piece of tape, I know how far forward and backward to place the scope for proper eye relief. And I am going to set that on the rings. In order to find proper eye relief, you need to determine if you are going to do most of your shooting prone, standing, or seated from a bench. That will make a difference. How you are on the rifle in what kind of shooting position will make a difference for how far forward and backward your head will be and the distance of your eye to this rear lens. So get comfortable in the position that you will do most of your shooting for this rifle. Take the magnification ring to max or near max magnification and then point it at a wall. And what we're looking for is we're trying to eliminate any vignetting within the scope. When you see a black ring in your field of view, we want the scope far enough away from your eye that there is no vignetting. And once you've found by moving the scope forward and backward where your optimal eye relief is, don't touch the gun, come around to the side, put a piece of tape where your ring meets the scope body, and that's your witness mark, and you can jump into mounting it this way. Double check here that you have enough clearance between the top of your barrel and the underside of the scope. And keep in mind, if you want to put a neoprene cover on here or some kind of objective lens cover, that you have clearance for that. If your scope is touching here, it'll never be properly mounted and you can damage the optic pretty significantly when you torque the top screw caps on. So now what I'm going to do is place my level on the scope cap. And years ago, people didn't suggest doing it this way because 20 years ago, scopes weren't as precisely machined as they are today, especially these top caps. But if you're using a quality optic, you can do this. So ensuring that the level is perpendicular to the bore line, I'm going to roll this scope until it reads level. This is kind of a tricky process, but easier than other ways of doing this. So once I have the scope level off the top turret, then I'm just going to reference to ensure that my rifle's still level. These bubble levels now read both dead level. So the next step of the process is simply to throw your rings together. As we do this, there are several things that we need to watch. We need to watch that our level, the scope remains level and true to the one that we have clamped to the barrel. We also have to watch that the gaps here and on the other side of the ring remain relatively consistent. You don't want one side really tight and the other one's gapped out. They should be about the same. The other thing we need to watch when we start to tighten these, and we're going to tighten them in a crisscross pattern, and we're going is we need to watch that when we tighten them, the scope doesn't roll. The scope will have a tendency to roll. So that takes some playing around and you have to do it carefully. The other thing I'm going to do is take my torque wrench back to 18 inch-pounds. I use 18 for most scopes, but check with your optic manufacturer to find out what they suggest. I've seen 16, I've seen 20. I do 18 on almost everything. If you put too much pressure on the scope tube, you could crush it. That would take a significant amount of force, but it's possible. So what I'm going to do now is just begin to get these started. I'm not worried about the scope rolling yet. That won't happen until I'm a little bit tighter. I'm not even going to go to crisscross pattern yet. I'm just going to get these threads started. All right, once I have all of my scope screws started, I'm going to check my level again on top and here. And now I'm going to begin taking them down and watching that gap. Now I'm going to start the crisscross tightening. But I'm not worried about much yet, except ensuring that the gap between the two sides of the ring is even. At this point, I am not actually tightening these screws. I'm just bringing them to the point where they would really start to bite if I torqued them. And once I ensure that my gap is the same on both sides, I'm going to move to the other ring. That looks good. Scope is still level. Okay. The rings are snug. The gaps between the ring pieces are even. Rifle's level, scope's level. At this point, we need to begin torquing the ring caps down. And this is kind of a tricky process because the scope can roll if you take one side too far, too fast. Again, crisscross pattern here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're going to keep doing that. We're not going to go straight to 18 inch-pounds. We're going to take it just a little bit at a time, making sure the scope doesn't roll and our gaps remain even. And by doing just a little bit at a time, that's how you keep the scope from rolling. Even if you're being careful, it can roll. And then you just have to restart the process. But as you begin to snug it up, it's less and less likely that it will roll. There's 18, 18. All right, that is how you properly mount a rifle scope. So, thanks for watching.